This is SleepFader, where mindfulness, music, stories, and sound design come together to remix your inner dialogue, bring down the stress levels, and dial in your best sleep. Hey, it's Jeff. Welcome back to SleepFader. It's taken me a little longer than usual to get this episode together. It's a special one, a milestone of sorts. I had planned for 10 episodes to complete Season 1, and well, here we are. This is number 10, and this first season has taught me a lot. I'll get into that in just a moment, but first, a quick reminder. SleepFader is designed to help you fall asleep, to help you with that transition from your busy day to a place of good rest. And for all of Season 1, it works something like this. We spend a few minutes here together in the studio lounge, where I'll talk a little and share some music that I've created to help get you settled into your comfort zone, your safe place. Then, I'll tell you the next part of a story that's been evolving since episode 1. And at the end of the story's relaxing soundscape will linger on for a while, then slowly fade to silence, while you fade away to sleep. Words, music, and sound for SleepFader are written, composed, produced, and engineered by yours truly. For now, SleepFader is ad-free. If you like what you're hearing and it helps you rest, support the show by subscribing at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you love to listen. Visit sleepfader.com for more. Taking a little break before producing this episode was a good idea, I think. It provided some distance between me and the idea of the show. Now, the ideas behind SleepFader have been a really helpful focusing lens, and I don't think this first season would have happened without that framework. Committing to that gave me a structure, a canvas. But stepping away from it helped me to recognize a couple of things. One is that SleepFader comes from a very earnest place, and by that I mean a place very close to my heart. You see, in my professional life, I had spent considerable time, years in fact, learning about applying best practices in mindfulness, music therapy, sound design, and voice content, specifically to help people sleep. Designing content to affect people at such a special and frequently vulnerable time in their most sacred personal spaces had become a mission for me. With a little time away, however, came some objectivity, and quite naturally some doubts. Is all of this a little too earnest? A little too close to the heart? After all, some of the other sleep content providers that I admire have managed to reach and help a lot of people without exposing so much of themselves. In other words, they don't talk so much, so plainly. And so maybe SleepFader in its current form is a little weird. I don't know. That's the nature of doubt, though. Like water, it always finds a way. It doesn't need much of an opening either. A little crack in the plaster will do. But you know what? I've come to recognize this as an essential aspect of the creative process, and I embrace it as part of doing my work and leading my life more creatively. As usual, it helps me to frame emotional concepts in musical terms, like tension and resolution. Musical tension is created when notes combine to generate an emotional liminality. And I've talked about this feeling before. Those feelings we get in long, empty corridors or strange echoing stairwells. In between feelings. That's musical tension. It's sound that begs the question, what is happening? And what might happen next? Musical resolution is created when the notes rearrange to answer those very questions. When the harmony changes just so, in just the right way, to provide an emotional release, to take you out of that long corridor and through a doorway into a more specific, more knowable place. Sometimes happy, sometimes not so much. But musical resolution is when the feelings become more grounded. This is movement, and it's how music moves forward through time. And it's how we move through days and weeks, months and years. Moments of tension and moments of release. It's how our bodies work too. Breathing in and breathing out. So, wherever there is doubt, we can use that to effect change. It's okay to rearrange the notes sometimes. As you listen for a few minutes, take a few slow, deep breaths and try to notice where you feel tension and release happening in your body. Alright, I think we're ready to go back to our story now. To an ending. The last few bars of this movement, anyway. We'll conclude this first season not far from where we began, about 1.5 miles up the shoreline, at a small seaside cottage where, just now, a friend has come to lure us outside for a goodbye walk down Sunset Beach. When Art showed up at my doorstep, I was rushing around, doing all the things one does when preparing to be away for a long while. Nothing too complicated, really. Modern technology takes care of most security concerns, though intruders aren't much of a problem around here. Still, I was busy checking all the windows. 23 of them, which seems like a lot of windows for a small cottage. And it wouldn't do to leave one open. There's no storm like an ocean storm. I closed and locked the cellar bulkhead. I flipped the lever that turns off the water to the washing machine, something my uncle always did, even if he was only leaving for a long weekend. I was staring at the thermostat on the wall, trying to decide where to leave it set, when Art rapped on the screen door and called out with his usual greeting of, "Hey, what do you say?" I was explaining that I was closing up, that I'd be gone for a while. But Art, waving my words away as though he were shooing flies, interrupted me. He said he knew that I would be traveling, and insisted that we take a walk down the beach before I left town. When I protested, he surprised me further by telling me that Jade would be waiting to pick me up in the parking lot at the beach entrance, on the far side. He said there was no need to hurry, that all my gear, which I had moved out to the front porch earlier, even my guitar, had already been packed into the car, and there was nothing left to do but lock up and start walking. I was struck silent by this, in part because Art doesn't leave a lot of room for anyone to chime in, but mostly because I had no idea how Art even knew who Jade was, let alone that I had travel plans, and that Jade had already stowed my minimal baggage in the car. Art told me to never mind all that, we'd get to it on the walk. Then, once he finally gave in to the fact that I was committed to my puttering, he followed me around the house while I finished up. Humming a quiet, familiar melody that I couldn't place, Art followed me up to the attic stairwell, where I checked one last time to make sure I'd turned the light off. He followed me through the upstairs hall to my bedroom, where I unplugged the space heater that I kept near the bed. Together, we walked back down the creaking, narrow staircase that led to the front entryway to the cottage. Halfway down, Art paused for a moment, reaching out to touch the frame of an old photograph of my uncle. Then he resumed his gentle humming and followed behind me again, back toward the kitchen. The seductive sigh of Wayne Shorter's saxophone streamed from the old radio on the windowsill. Footprints. Adam's Apple version, 1966. Art continued his quiet droning, and I realized that he'd been humming bits of Herbie Hancock's piano solo all along. He walked into the kitchen just in time to pick up the main motif, in perfect sync with Wayne. "I guess you know this one pretty well, huh?" I said. He raised a sarcastic red eyebrow at me, grinning. "I've heard it a time or two. Always liked this version better than the one he did with Miles. Am I right or am I right?" He pointed to the coffee pot on the counter. "Anything left in there? I'm just about out." I topped off Art's ever-present thermos, rinsed out the carafe in the kitchen sink, and set it to dry in the rack, where it would stay until I made it back home. "We can leave through the back door. I'll just lock up the front," I said. Art stayed behind this time while I took one last pass through the living room, past the turntable where a certain white-labeled one-sided LP still sat on the platter. Back in the kitchen, Art stood by the screen door, looking eager to get moving. "Just one more thing," I said. I reached over the counter and unplugged the coffee maker. Through his tangled red forest of a beard, Art scoffed. "You probably don't have to do that, you know. Pretty sure your uncle upgraded the circuit breakers and all that. GFIs and such." I stopped him. He always unplugged it before a trip. Just seems wrong not to. With that done, I flicked off the radio, and we made our exit through the back door and headed out onto the beach. Art kept a slow, relaxed pace. He wasn't one to move very quickly to begin with, but it wasn't the sand that was slowing him down. It seemed to me that Art had something he wanted to talk about. And so I waited patiently for him to start talking, knowing that once he got going, I was going to be in for a long ride. Anyway, I was still wondering what he knew about Jade, and how he knew about her. What or who else he might know. The waves made their steady case against the shoreline. This far up the beach, there weren't any hangars around. Tourist season was long over anyway. Nobody here but myself, Art, and a few gulls fighting over scraps of who knows what. Art's enormous beard glowed in the morning sun. He carried his thermos in one hand, and his beat-up old Birkenstock sandals in the other, his arms swinging. Finally, I gave in. The suspense, it's really boring, man. Art laughed, took a big pull from his thermos, and then finally he started talking. I think I'll let Art take it from here for a while. All right. I was just trying to wrap my head around where to begin. It's about 1.5 miles to the parking lot, am I right? That should be plenty of time for me to fill you in, but we both know how that goes. This'll take however long it takes. Anyway, you know who Tom Waits is, right? Yeah, the guy who played Renfield in that Dracula movie. Geez, man, that was over 30 years ago. You know he's made a few records too, don't you? Anyway, Waits has this idea about songs. He says that songs are like a form of time travel. His idea is that a 3-minute song recorded 70 years ago or whatever moves the people who are connected to it through time. The studio engineers, each individual musician, for them the song is a bubble that moves them forward long after they're gone. I mention this because your uncle, who I miss dearly, was a big jazz guy, and a great many of those records I have in my old collection came from him. A lot of memories there for me in those LPs, and not all of them are about the music. Yeah, I know. That your uncle and I were acquainted. Not to mention your new friends waiting for you up there in the parking lot. That's all news to you. But I've been here a long time, and relatively speaking, you're pretty new to this place. I also know that not long ago, you took delivery of a certain white-labeled record that's still sitting there on the turntable in your living room. You may recall I tried to text you that night after your set. I guess that me knowing about that is a surprise too. Your uncle, he talked about you a lot, and I'd seen you coming and going over the years. All those times you visited between your endless road tours, but your uncle asked me to keep our friendship, his and mine, a private matter. I think he wanted you to find your way to me on your own. Which you did, of course. Eventually, I mean. Anyone off the street can come into my shop and buy some paintbrushes or a set of pencils. But people with certain abilities, they tend to gravitate in my direction. Despite me being a bit of a talker. Yeah, it's fine, I'm comfortable in my grand verbosity. I'm glad we're friends, and not just because you took over that gig for me at Schmitty's, though I know he's glad to have you classing the place up. Your uncle, though, he had an eye for talent. And he'd often say, the kid notices things, just wait and see. It's going to happen soon. And something did, didn't it? Maybe it happened out on the boardwalk behind Schmitty's, or just any old place where you were minding your own business, not really looking for anything. 'Cause so often that's when we notice. Sometimes it's so subtle, so innocuous, or plain old familiar, that you don't even realize you found something important. Something that really matters. But somewhere along the way you picked up something interesting, didn't you? A token of some kind. A talisman. And one way or another, it brought you to the shopkeep. Am I right, or am I right? A guitar pick, huh? Yeah, that tracks. And right here on the beach. Why am I not surprised? And then Jade shows up right on schedule, doing her drawing thing. I bet that really got your gears turning, didn't it? Yeah, she's good. She tells me the drawings started coming to her around age 3. 3. Can you imagine? The image comes, she sets it down for just the right someone to find. And someone always does. And then, eventually, she drives. Now, about the shopkeep. Whatever you think you've figured out about his situation, You're probably wrong. He's not an alien. He's not a wizard. Think of him as temporally divergent. He's both here and not here. Now and not now. He wasn't always this way. It just sort of happened to him. A side effect of finding his token. Or it finding him, depending on how you look at it. It just happens that his talisman wasn't subtle or innocuous at all. And it wasn't something he could pick up and put into his pocket and walk away with. It was a whole damn building. His find was the Minor 7 Curiosity Shop. Now, you've been to the shop. Been there in person, and thanks to that one-sided LP the old guy sent, you've been there on a fade. Yeah, I know about that too. Been on a few fades of my own, but those are stories for another time. And our time together here is coming to a close. Let's stop walking for a minute. That breeze feels nice, am I right? It's nice and quiet here today. Just me, you, and the waves. Did you notice the sun is getting low? I know. It was just late morning when we left. Where does the time go? You know this beach pretty well by now, I guess. You've learned the rhythm of it. The people coming and going, in and out like the tide. The rise and fall of the waves, the wind singing over the crests and the troughs, in that ageless way that rouses the spirit and grounds the soul. That rhythm is deeply ingrained. It's traveled with you to all the places you've been, over all those winding roads and in between places. And now you're set to move on again. Only this new campaign is shaping up a little differently, isn't it? This won't be just another meandering tour of tap rooms, tourist traps, and the occasional hotel residency, will it? Not with Jade driving. She's not the meandering type. You two have plans. Am I right or am I right? I'll pick up where Art left off, I guess. He was right. Jade and I did have plans. I could see her vehicle parked just up ahead, idling quietly between a shiny new Jeep and an old Toyota pickup. Like it belonged there. Totally normal. Definitely not some kind of space-time traveling vessel masquerading as a luxury limousine. The car's running lights pulsed, orange to violet, violet to blue, and back again. Slow, like breathing. I looked up and found pinpricks of starlight perforating a cobalt sky. Somehow, while we were walking and talking, it had come to dusk. Well, that was fine. Art stopped and turned toward me. He pressed something small into the palm of my hand and held it there firmly, warmly, as he treated me to one last pearl of wisdom from his endless supply. Do you know what Picasso said about art? He said that art is the lie that enables us to realize the truth. Isn't that something? I said that it really was, but that I didn't quite get it. Art went on, he said. I'm sorry I held out on you, kid. Sorry I didn't tell you that I knew what you'd been going through, but it was what your uncle wanted. I hope you understand. I told Art it was reason enough for me. Art gave my hand a final squeeze, and then lifted his thermos toward Jade, who gave him a smart tip of her cap in return. It was so casual, so familiar. I wondered just how long those two had known each other, and what kind of things they'd been up to before I came into the picture. I watched Art as he resumed his casual stroll down the beach. Then I clambered up the sandy embankment to the car where Jade leaned against the driver's side fender with her arms crossed. She wore dark jeans and a black leather blazer, and had tucked her long curls up under her cap. Her mirrored lens specks shone like headlights. She looked sharp. She looked eager to get rolling. A wedge-shaped blanket of warm amber light spilled out through the open passenger door, inviting. "Took you long enough," Jade said. "Well, Art likes to talk, but I guess you knew that." Jade raised an eyebrow in one corner of her mouth and gestured toward the rear door. "If the gentleman is ready, somebody's been looking forward to seeing you again." I lowered myself into the plush interior of the car, and Vera the Russian blue jumped up into my lap. I was happy to see her, too. Grateful for her easy companionship after a long, strange day that seemed to go by too quickly. I rubbed the silky fur of her ears, and she sank deeper into my lap. Jade closed the passenger door. The cabin lights dimmed, and I sank deeper into the plush leather seat, relishing the familiar thrum of the motor. Soon, we were pulling out of the parking area, out onto the narrow road that would take us up the coast and once again away, and away, and away. And who knew for how long? Up and over the soaring cliffside, further and further away from the marina lights that glittered in the distance, away from questions and wonders that I'd suddenly grown too tired to contemplate. With Vera purring in my lap, and the car's motor purring all around me, I closed my eyes to all of that, to everything, content to let somebody else worry about the road and where it was going.